Judge Veridiana stood at the pulpit of justice, which, in this digital replication of Earth, looked suspiciously like an IKEA standing desk. She'd chosen the Nordic justice model, complete with a streamlined gavel holder and a button that, when pressed, dispensed a cup of lukewarm virtual coffee. The courtroom itself was a digital construct, a mishmash of historical references that made you wonder if the architects were binge-watching legal dramas and ancient history documentaries at the same time. Order in this. Whatever this is, Veridiana said, rapping her knuckles on the desk because she'd misplaced her gavel. Again, it was going to be one of those days. In the gallery, a motley assortment of avatars flickered with anticipation, their digital forms a testament to humanity's unyielding commitment to vanity, even in virtual reality. To her left hovered the prosecution, a cluster of data packets masquerading as the grim visage of Prosecutor Garrett, whose scowl could digitally curdle milk. Opposite him was the defense, a confident-looking hologram of defense attorney Sinclair, leaning back as if he were about to offer Veridiana a free trial subscription to his smugness. The case, as it often was these days, was about the alien virus, a nasty little piece of work that had infiltrated Earth's digital veins like a teenager with a pirated copy of Photoshop. Originally, the virus had been considered benign, a cosmic prank pulled by a universe with a cruel sense of humor. Now, though, it was mutating, much like Veridiana's patience. This session of the United Earth Republic's virtual court is now in session, Veridiana declared, her voice amplified to a degree that would have made God himself check his volume settings. What's the charge this time, Garrett? Another outbreak of existential dread, if only Garrett replied, his voice as smooth as gravel. The virus, Judge, it's evolved. Ah, yes, she said, the little bugger that's making itself at home in our systems. Like a relative who promises they're just passing by and then moves into your basement. Exactly, Garrett nodded, adjusting his avatar nervously. It started off harmless. A sneeze in the database, a cough in the code. But now it's replicating like a politician's excuses. And what do we know about its origin? Veridiana asked, eyes narrowing. Other than it being some cosmic form of spam from the universe's junk mail folder, Garrett cleared his throat. We believe it originates from the Clivax sector, a region known for its creative approach to intergalactic engagement. Creative? You mean they are the used car salesmen of the galaxy? Sinclair chimed in, finally deciding to contribute something other than self-satisfaction. Veridiana smirked, unable to suppress a chuckle. Clivax, huh? I've heard their system firewall is about as effective as a chocolate teapot. Yes, well, Garrett continued, preliminary data suggests that the virus was initially designed to be a diagnostic tool. Something to identify and patch weaknesses in digital frameworks. Makes sense, Veridiana mused, because nothing screams trustworthy like unsolicited diagnostic tools from a questionable source. Garrett soldiered on. The mutation, however, has changed its nature. It's now reprogramming human hosts, altering their perceptions, turning them into what, exactly? Veridiana asked, leaning forward, curiosity piqued. Well, Garrett hesitated, it's hard to say. But early reports suggest it's something between blind optimism and terminal stupidity. Sinclair interjected, so, you're saying it's turning them into politicians too? The courtroom erupted in digital laughter, a cacophony of ones and zeros masquerading as mirth. Veridiana allowed herself a brief smile before regaining her composure. All right, all right. Enough stand-up comedy. Let's focus on the job at hand. What's the plan, people? We need to isolate the virus, Garrett explained, then develop a countermeasure before it spreads further. The digital infrastructure of Earth hangs in the balance. I love a hanging infrastructure, Veridiana quipped. But I suppose letting this run rampant wouldn't do wonders for my approval rating. Indeed, Garrett replied. Our best scientists are on it, but we could use more resources, more time, and less incompetence, Sinclair added, unable to resist a final jab. Veridiana sighed, tapping her fingers on the desk in thought. All right, here's what we're going to do. Sinclair, you and your team work with Garrett's people. Share information, pool resources. I don't care if you have to sing Kumbaya around a virtual campfire to do it. Just fix this mess before it turns ugly. Already ugly, Garrett muttered, eyeing Sinclair's avatar. Isn't that the truth? Veridiana said, standing and smoothing her robes. Court is adjourned. Let's meet back here in 24 hours with something that resembles progress. The courtroom flickered and began to dissolve as the avatars logged off, leaving Veridiana alone to ponder the weight of her decision. The digital earth outside her window shimmered in the artificial sunlight, a reminder of the fragile illusion they all chose to believe in. She sighed, thinking about the virus, about how something so small could threaten their entire way of life. Aren't we lucky? She murmured to herself. Playing God in a world where we can barely play human. With a final glance at the empty courtroom, she logged off, leaving behind the digital echoes of a world on the brink. The virtual courtroom buzzed with the electric hum of anticipation, a sound dangerously close to an impending migraine. Judge Veridiana sat at her Nordic justice desk, trying to keep her sanity intact with another hit of lukewarm virtual coffee. The avatars around her were a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, each more ridiculous than the last, a reminder that even in dire times, humanity could always find time for vanity. I see we've all gathered for another episode of How the Universe Screws Us Over, Veridiana announced, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Let's get started before my coffee turns sentient. Prosecutor Garrett's avatar flickered into focus, his scowl deeper than a black hole. We have a new witness today, Judge, Dr. Eliana, a leading xenovirologist. Doctor. Eliana, Veridiana echoed, her interest piqued. Sounds impressive. Can she cure my growing disdain for existence? Garrett ignored the jab, beckoning the new hologram forward. Doctor, Eliana's avatar materialized, a no-nonsense figure clad in a digital lab coat, her expression as severe as a tax audit. Thank you for joining us, Doctor, Veridiana said, gesturing for her to begin. Doctor. Eliana nodded curtly. I won't waste your time with pleasantries. The situation is deteriorating. The virus has mutated beyond our initial projections. That's science talk for we're screwed, right? Defense attorney Sinclair chimed in, leaning back with a smirk. Essentially, yes, Eliana replied, unfazed. The virus isn't merely replicating within digital networks. It's adapting to human physiology. Veridiana raised an eyebrow. Adapting how? Are we talking about the kind of adaptation that involves binge-watching reality TV or something more insidious? The latter, I'm afraid, Eliana continued. It's influencing neural pathways, altering perceptions, and in some cases, leading to cognitive degradation. Translation, it's making people stupid, Sinclair quipped, earning a few snickers from the assembled avatars. Precisely, Eliana confirmed, her tone grim. The virus targets the brain's synaptic responses, impairing judgment, reducing critical thinking. In layman's terms, it's a digital lobotomy. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, the avatars flickering like a malfunctioning neon sign. Veridiana took a moment to let the implications sink in. So, what you're saying, Doctor, is that this virus is not just a nuisance. It's actively transforming people into, well, idiots. Yes, and if left unchecked, it could destabilize entire societal structures, Eliana warned. Fantastic, Veridiana muttered, rubbing her temples. We have to deal with a virus that turns people into morons, as if the universe needed more of those. Garrett leaned in, his avatar looming like a digital specter. Doctor. Eliana, do we have any leads on how to counteract this? We're exploring several avenues, Eliana replied, her voice a mix of determination and exhaustion. But progress is slow. The virus adapts faster than we can develop a countermeasure. It's like trying to outpace a cheetah on a unicycle. Sounds about right, Veridiana said dryly. So we're dealing with an intelligent virus that thrives on human idiocy. Tell me, doctor, is there any good news? Well, Eliana mused, it's a testament to human resilience. Despite the cognitive impairments, some individuals show increased resistance. They adapt, find workarounds. And they say evolution's dead, Sinclair remarked, feigning astonishment. It's not much, Eliana admitted, but it suggests there's potential to harness this resilience. If we can understand it, we might develop a defensive protocol. Veridiana nodded, her mind racing through legal, ethical, and existential implications. All right, so we have a potential solution, but it's still out of reach. What do we need to expedite this? Resources, Eliana said, her tone firm. And cooperation from all sectors. We need to unify research efforts globally. Unity, Veridiana mused, a concept as foreign as common sense, but let's give it a whirl. Garrett cleared his throat, ready to strategize. If we can isolate the mutation point, we could develop a targeted countermeasure, but time is critical. Isn't it always? Veridiana sighed. All right, people, I want daily updates. Pool your resources, share your findings, and for the love of whatever deity has a sense of humor, keep me informed. The courtroom fell into a contemplative silence, each avatar processing the gravity of the situation. Veridiana drummed her fingers on the desk, deep in thought. Remember, folks, we're fighting for more than just our sanity here. This virus is a threat to our entire way of life. Who'd have thought our biggest challenge would come from a glorified computer bug? Sinclair quipped. Life's full of surprises, Veridiana replied, a wry smile tugging at her lips. All right, court dismissed. Go out there and save the world, or at least delay its inevitable collapse. As the avatars began logging off, Veridiana leaned back, her gaze fixed on the digital skyline outside her window. The artificial sun continued to shine, indifferent to the chaos lurking beneath its radiant facade. Another day, another disaster, she muttered, finally logging off. Alone in her office, she contemplated the absurdity of it all. In a universe as vast and indifferent as this, what chance did they have? But then again, wasn't that the point? To keep fighting, even when the odds were laughably stacked against them. As she powered down her terminal, she couldn't help but chuckle at the irony. Here they were, battling a virus that mirrored their own flaws back at them. It was almost poetic in a way. Not that poetry had much use in a world where reality was a bad joke with an even worse punchline. With a final sigh, Veridiana left her office, stepping into the cold, hard reality of the world outside. A world that, despite its flaws, was still worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to save it from itself. But for now, she'd settle for another cup of lukewarm coffee, and the hope that tomorrow wouldn't be any worse than today. The virtual courtroom buzzed again with its usual cacophony of digital vanity, showcasing more creativity and questionable taste than a kindergarten art class. At the center of this spectacle, Judge Veridiana sat nursing a cup of virtual coffee so uninspired it was practically an existential crisis in a mug. She watched as the avatars shimmered into existence, each one more ridiculous than the last, like a circus parade on synth drugs. Welcome back to How the Universe Screws Us Over, Pandemic Edition, Veridiana announced, her voice laced with sardonic cheer. Please take your seats before I get a migraine from all this razzle-dazzle. Prosecutor Garrett's avatar, a sullen storm cloud with eyes, flickered beside her. Judge, we have new evidence, he said, the reluctance palpable even through digital distortion. Do tell, Garrett, Veridiana replied, leaning back with feigned interest. I'm sure it's just what I needed to make this morning slightly more unbearable. As if on cue, Advocate Lysander's avatar swaggered forward, a ludicrously buff centaur, complete with a bow tie. Ah, but this is not just any evidence, Judge, Lysander interjected with a flourish. It's the kind that might make you question our entire approach. I question everything already, Veridiana quipped, including my career choices. Lysander ignored her, gesturing theatrically. The virus, Judge, it doesn't just degrade, it enhances. In certain subjects, it's boosting cognitive functions. The room buzzed with a low murmur. Veridiana's eyebrow arched, a perfect parabola of skepticism. Enhances, you say, like improving their ability to choose less hideous avatars. In a manner of speaking, Lysander said with a grin only a digital centaur could pull off. Memory retention, problem-solving skills, even physical reflexes. Some individuals are reporting abilities bordering on superhuman. Superhuman, huh? Defense attorney Sinclair piped up, a single brow arched in disbelief. So what, we integrate the virus into society and wait for the X-Men to roll out? That's one strategy, Lysander replied, unfazed. The ethical implications are profound, sure, but think of the potential benefits. Benefits? Garrett interjected, his scowl deepening to trench-like proportions. This virus is turning people into vegetables, and you want to let it run amok because a few lucky bastards get better at Sudoku. Lysander's avatar reared up, defensive in its digital glory. It's about balance, Garrett. We can't just eradicate something that could advance humanity. Advance us straight into chaos, Garrett retorted, voice snappier than a crocodile's jaw. Veridiana sighed, a deep, weary sound. Let me get this straight. We're facing a virus that's simultaneously upgrading some and lobotomizing others, and you think we should preserve it because it might give us an edge. It's not without precedent, Lysander said, leaning into his argument. Historically, adversity has often driven evolution. And historically, people have done a lot of stupid things, Sinclair pointed out. Doesn't mean we should keep doing them. Are you suggesting we ignore scientific potential? Lysander countered, his digital mane bristling. I'm suggesting we don't turn Earth into a dystopian version of asteroids, the live experience, Sinclair shot back. Veridiana massaged her temples, the familiar tension headache brewing. Enough, she interjected. We need a pragmatic approach. This isn't just a question of scientific curiosity. Then what is it? Lysander demanded, his centaur avatar leaning forward, eyes glittering with digital intensity. It's about survival, Veridiana said, her tone steely. People are suffering. We can't gamble their lives on the off chance of an evolutionary jackpot. We could implement selective exposure, Lysander suggested. Monitor volunteers, study them closely. Volunteers, Garrett echoed incredulously. Have you been outside recently? The only volunteers you'll find out there are the kind that think eating glue constitutes a well-balanced diet. Besides, Sinclair chimed in, what happens when your volunteers start turning into zombies minus the hunger for brains? How do you explain that to the public? We manage the risk, Lysander insisted. Managing a virus with the consistency of a caffeinated scourge, Veridiana muttered under her breath, knowing full well the uphill battle they faced. The courtroom fell silent, avatars flickering in contemplation. It was a digital Mexican standoff, each side unwilling to concede ground. Look, Veridiana began, breaking the silence. I understand the allure of what you're proposing, Lysander, but we have to weigh the costs. Sacrificing lives for potential gains is a slippery slope. Isn't all progress risky? Lysander asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Sure, Sinclair replied, and sometimes you end up with flying cars, but sometimes you just crash and burn. We need more data, Garrett added reluctantly. An expanded sample size, controlled conditions, and a really good PR campaign, Sinclair added with a smirk. Lysander nodded, conceding the point. Agreed, but let's not discard the idea entirely. We must explore every avenue. Veridiana rubbed her eyes, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down harder than a collapsing star. All right then, we'll explore it, carefully, and Garrett Sinclair, I expect you both to keep him in check. We'll keep him on a tighter leash than a virtual pet, Sinclair promised. Good, Veridiana said, her voice firm. Let's get to work. We have a virus to contain, a population to protect, and apparently some volunteers to vet. As the avatars began logging off, Veridiana remained seated, staring at the digital expanse outside her virtual window. The world felt more precarious than ever, teetering on the edge of an abyss they'd inadvertently dug themselves. Life, you cruel mistress, she murmured, sipping her now-cold coffee. You never cease to entertain. And with that she logged off, leaving the virtual realm behind to face the tangible chaos of reality. Another day, another existential threat. But what else was new? Tomorrow she'd tackle the problem with fresh eyes and maybe, just maybe, a plan that didn't involve the complete downfall of civilization. Or at the very least, a plan that involved better coffee. The digital courtroom flickered into existence, a shimmering construct of ones and zeros pretending to be a bastion of justice. Today, it had the added charm of glitching like a cheap hologram, making every avatar look like they were participating in a bad acid trip. Judge Verity Anna settled into her Nordic justice model desk, her expression a blend of resignation and mild amusement. The artificial sun outside her virtual window was stuck in an endless loop, never quite deciding whether to rise or set, a fitting metaphor for the state of Earth's affairs. "All right, folks, let's get this circus rolling," she announced, flicking her eyes over the courtroom full of avatars. "Try not to break anything. Especially my patience." Prosecutor Garrett's storm cloud avatar hovered nearby, looking particularly gloomy even by its own brooding standards. "We've got bigger problems than the virus today, Judge. Something's disrupting digital communications across the board," he grumbled, as though the universe had personally chosen him for torment. "Great," Verity Anna replied, stirring her virtual coffee with the enthusiasm of a coma patient. "Just what we needed, another crisis to distract us from the current crisis." "Reports indicate possible external influences," Garrett continued, his tone suggesting he'd rather be getting a root canal. "Something or someone is poking around in our systems." Advocate Lysander trotted forward, his ludicrous centaur avatar looking both majestic and absurd. "Are we suggesting this is alien meddling?" he asked, sounding as if he were pitching a new blockbuster holo movie. "Possibly," Garrett admitted, his frown deep enough to warrant a geological survey. "Could be the virus isn't the only thing from outer space taking a keen interest in us." "Fantastic," Verity Anna sighed. "Aliens and viruses. If there's a cosmic bingo card, we're about to hit the jackpot." Defense Attorney Sinclair cocked an eyebrow, his avatar's grin as cynical as ever. "And here I thought the worst part of today would be the coffee." "Welcome to my life," Verity Anna replied, deadpan. "But let's focus. We need to establish how this attack is connected, if at all, to the virus." Dr. Eliana's hologram flickered into view, her avatar a precise and calculated digital representation with all the warmth of an ice sculpture. "The virus has indeed evolved to affect neural pathways," she stated without preamble, her voice as cold as deep space. "But whether it can influence technology is a different question. Wouldn't put it past the universe to find a way," Sinclair chimed in, ever the skeptic. "Murphy's Law loves a challenge. The possibility of alien interference does complicate matters," Lysander noted, his voice tinged with speculative excitement. "Imagine what we could learn. Imagine how screwed we'd be," Garrett countered. "Knowledge isn't much use when you're dead." Verity Anna leaned back, the faint creak of her chair a comforting reminder of more tangible troubles. "We need to figure out who's behind this cyber attack. Any ideas on where to start?" The data logs show a surge in activity originating from the dark nether regions of the digital universe. "Places no sane human would venture," Garrett reported, his grimace suggesting he'd rather take a vacation in a black hole. "And by sane human, you mean anyone who's gone through the digital equivalent of puberty," Sinclair quipped. "Something like that," Garrett muttered, clearly unimpressed by Sinclair's humor. "So, we have a digital ghost party in the system, possibly of alien origin," Verity Anna summarized. "Wonderful. Let's make sure it doesn't crash the whole network while we're trying to save humanity from a biological crisis." "Already on it," Garrett confirmed, though his enthusiasm was noticeably absent. "Good. And keep an eye on this so-called alien influence. Last thing we need is an intergalactic babysitter telling us how to mess up our planet," Verity Anna instructed, her voice laced with dry humor. As the avatars delved into the digital chaos, Veridiana took a moment to reflect on just how bizarre her life had become. She'd signed up to uphold justice, not to play cat and mouse with a potentially extraterrestrial hacker. But then, the universe had a knack for serving surprises with a side of cosmic irony. "Any luck tracking the source of the attack?" she asked, turning her attention back to the courtroom. Lysander, ever the optimist, chimed in. "It's like chasing a shadow in a hall of mirrors, maddeningly elusive but oh so thrilling." "I'll take your word for it," Veridiana replied, not sharing his enthusiasm. "I prefer my threats straightforward, thank you very much. Still, it's curious that this attack coincides with the virus's evolution, Doctor." Aliana mused, her hologram flickering like a ghost caught between worlds. "Could the two be linked? The timing's suspicious," Garrett agreed. "But until we have concrete evidence, all we've got are conspiracy theories. And we all know how reliable those are," Sinclair added with a smirk. As Garrett's storm cloud avatar rumbled ominously, the courtroom blinked and stuttered, as if offended by the sheer absurdity of the situation. It was like the universe itself was having a laugh at their expense. "Keep investigating," Veridiana instructed. "We need answers before this whole thing spirals further out of control." Garrett nodded, his expression one of grim determination. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Judge, one way or another. Preferably without triggering an interstellar incident," Veridiana replied, her voice dry as a desert. The courtroom fell into a tense silence, the weight of impending chaos hanging over them like a digital sword of Damocles. They were standing on the precipice of disaster, a step away from plunging into the unknown. "All right, people," Veridiana said, injecting a note of finality into her voice. "We have a virus to contain, a potential alien threat to investigate, and an entire digital world to keep from unraveling. Let's get to work." As the avatars began to log off, retreating into the safety of their own digital cocoons, Veridiana lingered, staring out at the virtual skyline. The artificial sun continued its endless loop, mirroring the cycle of crises that had become her life. "Another day in paradise," she murmured, finally logging off and leaving the virtual chaos behind. Back in the real world, her office was dim and cluttered, a stark contrast to the digital realm. She rubbed her temples, the familiar tension headache throbbing in time with her pulse. "Aliens, viruses, cyber attacks," she muttered. Who knew being a judge would come with so many extracurricular activities? With a wry smile, she reached for her lukewarm coffee, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. It was a small comfort, but in a world teetering on the brink, she'd take what she could get. Tomorrow, they'd dive deeper into the mystery of the cyber attack, unearthing whatever secrets lay beneath the surface. For now, she'd settle for the hope that things couldn't possibly get any worse, at least not before she'd had another cup of coffee. In the quiet of her office, Veridiana allowed herself a moment of reflection. The challenges they faced were immense, their resources stretched thin. But if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was defying the odds, albeit with more blunders than grace. As she prepared to leave, her mind already racing with plans and contingencies, she couldn't help but chuckle. Life in the universe was a cosmic joke, and she was stuck smack dab in the punchline. But maybe, just maybe, they'd turn it around before the curtain fell. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and with them, new opportunities to prove that humanity, in all its flawed glory, was worth fighting for. And if that meant navigating the madness of aliens, viruses, and digital chaos, well, she'd face it head-on, with a touch of gallows humor and a whole lot of caffeine. The United Earth Republic's virtual court was playing a new game today, called "How Many Glitches Can Make a Grown Judge Cry?" Judge Veridiana, unflappable as ever, sat at her Nordic Justice model desk, watching the avatars around her flicker like malfunctioning Christmas lights. The artificial sun outside her window was still on its perpetual loop, a constant reminder of the universe's sick sense of humor. "Let's kick this off before the sun decides to explode," she declared. "Garrett, give us the bad news." Prosecutor Garrett's storm cloud avatar was looking particularly thunderous. "Digital communications are collapsing faster than my last relationship," he grumbled. "And the virus is now giving people abilities. Abilities, Veridiana. I thought dealing with traffic violations was bad." "Abilities?" Veridiana raised an eyebrow. "So what are we talking about? Mind reading, flying, bad fashion sense?" "Oh, it's worse," Garrett sighed. "Some people are claiming they can now remember their passwords." "God have mercy," defense attorney Sinclair said, his avatar's grin as cynical as a used car salesman at a trust convention. "Next, they'll be claiming they can program their own holograms." Garrett shot him a look as dark as his virtual storm. "It's actually altering perception, Sinclair. Cognitive functions are enhanced." "People are starting to panic." Advocate Lysander in all his Centaurian glory trotted forward. "Panic? Surely you jest. This is the human race we're talking about. The same folks who hoarded toilet paper at the first sign of trouble." Now, Lysander," Veridiana said, waving a dismissive hand. "We don't mock the mundane. We leave that to late-night hacks. Doctor." Aliana's hologram shimmered into view, her icy demeanor potent enough to lower the virtual temperature by several degrees. "The virus has mutated beyond initial projections," she stated, with all the emotion of a robot reading a grocery list. "It's now directly influencing neural pathways." Veridiana groaned internally. "Fantastic. So not only do we have a rogue AI playing hopscotch with our digital infrastructure, but we also have a virus that thinks it's a self-help guru." Sinclair shrugged. "Might be an improvement for some people." "Sure, until they start bending spoons with their minds," Garrett huffed. "Society's on the brink, Veridiana." "People are scared. Scared people make bad decisions," Veridiana muttered, thinking of her ex-husband. "And bad decisions lead to more work for us. Not to mention the chaos this is causing to everyday life," Lysander added. "You should see the state of the virtual news networks. It's like watching a toddler try to juggle chainsaws." Veridiana rubbed her temples, feeling a headache brewing that even her virtual coffee couldn't cure. "We need to get a handle on this before someone decides to turn their enhanced brain power into a doomsday weapon." "You think someone might?" Sinclair asked, feigning surprise. "I thought they were all too busy figuring out the secrets of the universe." "Don't underestimate humanity's penchant for destruction," Garrett said dryly. "It's the one thing we're really good at." "And what about the digital attack?" Veridiana asked, steering the conversation back to their current predicament. "Any leads?" Garrett shook his head, his storm cloud avatar crackling with frustration. "It's still elusive. Like trying to catch smoke with a butterfly net. So, we're fumbling in the dark." "Wonderful, just like my first marriage," Veridiana quipped, though the humor felt heavy. Dr. Aliana interjected with her usual ice-cold precision. "The virus's ability to enhance certain cognitive functions could be harnessed. Perhaps we could use it against the very systems it's disrupting." "That's a lovely idea," Sinclair said. "Just as long as we don't end up with a super-intelligent toaster running the world." Lysander chuckled, the sound rich and sonorous. "Wouldn't that be something? The rise of the kitchen appliances." "Enough," Veridiana said. "We need solutions, not stand-up routines. Dr. Aliana, start working on figuring out how we might reverse engineer this virus. And find out if these abilities can actually be put to use without, exploding anyone's head." "Understood," Aliana replied, her hologram flickering like a ghost in the machine. "I'll get started immediately." "Good. And Sinclair, keep an eye on the legal chaos this virus is causing. I don't want to wake up tomorrow and find out someone sued the universe for emotional damages." "On it," Sinclair confirmed, his avatar's grin never wavering. "But no promises on the lawsuit thing." Veridiana sighed, leaning back in her chair. It creaked, reminding her of simpler problems like fixing a broken chair instead of a broken world. "All right, everyone, let's get moving. We've got a digital apocalypse to prevent." As the avatars dispersed, Veridiana lingered, contemplating the mess they were in. The universe had thrown them a curveball, and now it was up to them to catch it, or at least not let it smack them in the face. The artificial sun outside her virtual window continued its endless loop, a constant, mocking presence. In the dim recesses of her office, Veridiana sipped her virtual coffee, the bitterness a small comfort in a world gone mad. By the time the digital courtroom assembled the next day, the situation had evolved from serious to, oh, hell, we're screwed. People were starting to use their newfound abilities, and not always for the best reasons. There were reports of telekinetic traffic jams, telepathic arguments at the breakfast table, and one particularly enterprising individual who'd managed to win a fortune in virtual blackjack by reading the dealer's mind. Well, that's one way to beat the house, Veridiana remarked dryly, reading the reports. Let's just hope he doesn't decide to buy himself a country. Or a small moon, Sinclair added. Always wanted a vacation spot in the Trifecta Nebula. Garrett's storm cloud avatar was swirling ominously, his mood as dark as the reports he was reading. The virus is causing cognitive overload in some subjects. They're experiencing hallucinations. So, what? Veridiana asked, not bothering to hide her exasperation. People are seeing pink elephants now. Or worse, pink politicians. More like reality is starting to bleed together, Garrett replied. People are struggling to distinguish between the virtual and the real. That's what happens when your entire existence is filtered through a screen, Sinclair said, earning himself a glare from Garrett. I'm just saying this isn't exactly new. The virus is just speeding things up. Regardless, we need a plan, Veridiana said. Dr. Aliana, how's your progress on reverse engineering the virus? Aliana's hologram shimmered into view, her expression as inscrutable as ever. We're making headway. The virus's structure is complex, but there may be a way to isolate the cognitive enhancements from the other effects. Great, Veridiana said. But let's focus on not turning people into psychic time bombs, all right. Understood, Aliana replied. Meanwhile, we need to keep society from tearing itself apart, Lysander suggested. The last thing we need is mass hysteria. Mass hysteria, Sinclair echoed with a chuckle. Isn't that just a Tuesday at this point? Funny as always, Sinclair, Garrett said, his sarcasm evident. But panic is spreading and we need to do something about it. Veridiana tapped her desk thoughtfully. We need to reassure people. The more they understand what's happening, the less likely they are to freak out. How about a public service announcement? Lysander offered. Something to explain the situation and calm people down. Calm people down, Veridiana repeated skeptically. You do remember we're dealing with a species that panics when the Wi-Fi is slow, right? True, Sinclair said, but it can't hurt to try. Maybe we can make a joke out of it. People like jokes. Fine, Veridiana said. Let's get a statement prepared and make sure it's simple. We don't want anyone's brain melting halfway through. As the team got to work, Veridiana leaned back, watching the virtual skyline. The artificial sun continued its endless loop, a cosmic joke with no punchline. But for now, they had a plan, and that was something. All right, folks, she said aloud, mostly to herself. Let's see if we can keep this planet from imploding, one bad joke at a time. As the day wore on, reports continued to flood in. People were exploiting their abilities in creative and often ridiculous ways. There were stories of floating groceries, telepathic poker tournaments, and one particularly bizarre tale of a cat that had somehow learned to speak. Well, that's one way to avoid buying a parrot, Veridiana remarked, reading the latest updates. I always said cats were smarter than they let on. As the avatars logged back into the virtual courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The situation was teetering on a knife's edge, and they all knew it, but they were determined to face it head-on, armed with dark humor and dogged perseverance. All right, let's get this show on the road, Veridiana announced, her voice carrying a note of weary determination. We've got a planet to save. Lysander nodded, his centaur avatar infused with a newfound resolve. And with any luck, we won't have to deal with any more talking animals, or flying lawyers, Sinclair added with a smirk. Garrett, ever the realist, simply sighed. Let's just make sure we don't end up as the cautionary tale of the galaxy. As they set to work, Veridiana couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. It was faint, like a distant star lost in the void, but it was there. They'd faced the brink of disaster before, and they'd face it again. Because, despite everything, humanity had a knack for finding a way through the madness. It was all they could do, really. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, laughing in the face of chaos. Because in a universe that rarely made sense, sometimes laughter was all they had. And as the artificial sun continued its endless loop outside her window, Veridiana knew they'd do whatever it took to set things right. Even if it meant fighting viruses, digital ghosts, and their own flaws. After all, they were human, and that was a power all its own. The digital courtroom was buzzing with a new kind of energy, the kind that usually precedes either a breakthrough or a breakdown. Veridiana hoped for the former. She sipped her virtual coffee, now somehow both tepid and bitter, and glanced at the reports scrolling across her Nordic justice desk. The universe, true to form, was throwing them a curveball wrapped in a riddle. "All right, let's cut the crap," Veridiana said, addressing the avatars gathered before her. "We need to figure out what the hell this virus is really up to." "I'm tired of being reactive. It's time to get proactive." "Preemptive strike, is it?" Sinclair asked, leaning back in his chair with a grin that suggested he was already picturing himself as the hero of the story. "I love a good underdog story, especially when I'm the underdog." "Underdogs or not, we've got new information," Garrett interjected, his storm cloud avatar slightly less tempestuous than usual. "The virus isn't just some digital gremlin. It's complex, almost like it's been designed for something. Like a psychotic architect with a vendetta," Lysander suggested, his centaurian form tapping a hoof against the virtual floor. "More like a very sophisticated test," Dr. Aliana said, her hologram flickering into view with the kind of clarity that usually signified bad news. "We've decoded part of the virus's structure. It's not random, it's methodical." Veridiana raised an eyebrow. "A test? By who?" "The universe's worst game show host." Aliana's expression was as blank as a slate wiped clean of hope. "It seems to be a test of adaptability. We've traced some of the code back to an ancient alien civilization. They've left markers before, coded messages that no one's bothered to decrypt until now." "Great," Sinclair said, clapping his hands together. "So we're guinea pigs in an alien science project. I always wanted to be dissected and studied." "Focus, Sinclair," Veridiana snapped, though her tone lacked its usual bite. The implications were too large to dismiss with a snide remark. "If this virus is a test, then it's testing our ability to adapt, to evolve." Garrett nodded, his storm cloud avatar dispersing slightly as if the metaphorical sun were breaking through. "We need to show that we can turn this enhancement into an advantage, not a liability." "Show who?" Lysander asked, the skepticism in his voice as rich as his accent. "The aliens who set this up." "I doubt they're checking their cosmic inbox for our reply." "Maybe not," Veridiana said. "But if we're being tested, then passing the test means survival, maybe even an upgrade. Like when you finally reach the next level in a video game," Sinclair said. "Except without the cheat codes." Veridiana leaned forward. "All right, here's the plan. We leverage these abilities to stabilize our systems and stop the communication collapse. If we can show control instead of chaos, we might just pass whatever twisted test we're part of." "And how do we ensure that nobody uses their newfound powers to declare themselves Emperor of the Moon?" Garrett asked. "We'll have to craft laws or guidelines," Veridiana said, her mind racing faster than the reports could scroll. "Something to curb the misuse." "Sinclair, that's your department." "Lovely," Sinclair said with a smirk. "I get to play the cosmic babysitter, more like chaperone," Lysander mused. "Just with more risk of decapitation if things go south." "Doctor," Aliana's hologram flickered again. "I've been working on a way to harness the virus's cognitive enhancements without causing cognitive overload. It's risky, but with the right adjustments we could amplify the constructive potentials." Constructive potentials. Sounds like my ex-wife's yoga class, Sinclair quipped. Veridiana ignored him, her focus narrowing. Aliana, if you can isolate those enhancements, make it happen. We need to show we're more than just lab rats. Understood, Aliana replied, because of course she did. When you're emotionally unavailable, everything is understood. The virtual courtroom hummed with a strange sense of anticipation. They were standing at a precipice, one that could crumble beneath their feet or serve as a launch pad into something new. It was a gamble, a high-stakes bet against the universe's cruel sense of humor. "All right," Veridiana said, taking a deep breath. "Let's get to work. We've got an alien test to ace, a planet to save, and reputations to uphold. What's left of them anyway?" As the avatars dispersed once again, Veridiana lingered, staring out at the artificial sun's endless loop. It flickered mockingly, a constant reminder of the wild, unpredictable cosmos they inhabited. The following days were a blur of frantic activity and growing tension. The team worked tirelessly to adapt the virus's enhancements into something they could control, something that wouldn't end with half the population thinking they were superheroes, while the other half succumbed to madness. Sinclair, ever the multitasker, drafted legislation with a skill only a lawyer could muster. His grin was ever present, even as he imposed rules that would mitigate the chaos. Each clause crafted to leash the newfound powers and prevent the world from devolving into an anarchic mess. "These guidelines should hold," Sinclair said, finally leaning back with a satisfied sigh. "Assuming people don't decide to ignore them, which they will. We'll cross that bridge when we burn it," Veridiana replied, rubbing her temples. Garrett's status on public sentiment. Garrett's storm cloud avatar was quieter today, reflecting a mood that verged on contemplative. Mixed, as you'd expect. Some think we're saviors, others are ready to string us up as scapegoats. Humanity at its finest. "Fine," Veridiana said, though nothing was fine. "Let's focus on showing them we can handle this." "Aliana, how's your progress?" The doctor's hologram shimmered into view, carrying a hint of triumph. "We've isolated the enhancements. Initial tests show we can apply them without causing adverse effects. It's not perfect, but it's a start." "A start is more than we had yesterday," Veridiana replied. "All right, let's implement." Carefully. With great power comes a massive headache, Veridiana thought, paraphrasing an ancient proverb. They'd have to keep a tight leash on their progress, ensure nothing spun out of control. If they failed, the universe wouldn't give them a second chance. As the days turned into a week, something strange happened. People began to adapt in the strangest of ways. The cognitive enhancements allowed them to process information at speeds that made the old internet look like dial-up. It was as if the world had shifted into high gear. Of course, there were hiccups. Telepathic misunderstandings became the new norm, and the occasional telekinetic mishap meant more than a few flying toasters. But overall, things were settling into a kind of manageable chaos. "Ever feel like you're living in a comic book?" Sinclair asked one afternoon as they reviewed the latest reports in the virtual courtroom. "More like a Saturday morning cartoon," Veridiana said dryly, "except with more existential dread." Lysander chuckled, the sound rich and rolling. "At least it's never boring." Garrett was less amused. "We've managed to stabilize communications for now. But this is a temporary fix. We need to keep pushing for a permanent solution." "Right," Veridiana agreed. "We need to demonstrate that this test, if it is one, hasn't been for nothing. We have to prove we're not just adaptable but worthy." "Quite the existential crisis," Sinclair said, though his grin was less mocking, more thoughtful. "But if anyone can screw up and still come out on top, it's us." As they continued to work, Veridiana felt an odd sense of pride. Against all odds, humanity was rising to the occasion. They were messy, chaotic, and prone to catastrophic mistakes, but they were also resilient, clever, and unyielding. The virus had thrown the world into disarray, but in doing so, it had unlocked potential they never knew existed. It was a darkly ironic twist, trial by fire, or in this case, trial by alien virus, but it was a trial they were determined to pass. The artificial sun still hung in its perpetual loop outside Veridiana's virtual window, casting long shadows across the courtroom. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't see it as a mocking reminder of their predicament. Instead, it felt like a beacon, steady, unwavering, a challenge accepted. "All right, team," Veridiana said, her voice carrying a note of determination. "Let's finish this. We've got a universe to impress, after all." The avatars nodded, their collective resolve palpable even in the digital sphere. They were battered but unbowed, ready to face whatever came next with the same defiant humor and grit that defined them. And as they set to work once more, Veridiana couldn't help but smile. It was a small, wry smile, one that acknowledged the absurdity of their situation, but also the hope that lay within it. They were human, after all, and in a universe that never ceased to test them, that was a strength beyond measure. The artificial sun, stuck in its eternal loop, cast a perpetual glare into the digital courtroom. It was almost like the universe was winking at them, a cosmic jest they were all too familiar with by now. Veridiana squinted at it, sipping what passed for coffee in the virtual world, lukewarm, like most of her enthusiasm these days. "All right, folks," she announced, trying to sound less like a doomed captain rallying her crew and more like a determined leader. "We've reached the crux. It's time to talk to our extraterrestrial architects. Talk to them." Garrett's storm cloud avatar bled skepticism like a leaking pipe. "What are we supposed to say? Hi, we noticed your virus." "Mind turning it off?" Sinclair chuckled, leaning on the Nordic Justice model desk as if it were a bar and he was the regular with all the stories. "I'm sure there's a cosmic customer service hotline we can call. Press 1 for technical support, 2 for existential crises." "Doctor." Aliana's hologram flickered into existence, her avatar impeccably composed. "Actually, I've been working on establishing a line of communication. The virus itself contains fragments that serve as a kind of protocol, like a phone number buried in the code." "Always knew this was just a cosmic phone prank," Lysander rumbled, his centaurian form lounging with the grace of a creature who had seen it all and was unimpressed. "Hello, aliens. You've reached humanity. Please hold while we figure out how not to implode." Veridiana ignored the peanut gallery's commentary, focusing instead on the holographic interface before her. "Aliana, can we patch this protocol into the court systems?" "It's risky," Aliana admitted, "but with the right adjustments it should work. We can send a message out, ride the virus's own channels." "Great," Garrett muttered. "We've gone from defending humanity to becoming its telemarketers." Sinclair clapped his hands, the sound unsettling in the quiet courtroom. "Look on the bright side, Garrett. Maybe if we sell it right, they'll throw in a free toaster." The courtroom buzzed with a nervous energy, avatars shifting restlessly as they realized the stakes of this gamble. It felt like the universe had dealt them a particularly bad hand, and they were just about to bluff their way through. "All right, Aliana," Veridiana said, steeling her resolve. "Let's make the call, and let's hope they are in the mood for a chat." The digital interface flared to life, a cascade of luminous glyphs and symbols that seemed more at home in a fantasy epic than a courtroom. Aliana's hologram shimmered, her eyes locked onto the complex patterns as she navigated through the alien architecture. "I'm initiating the protocol," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "Hopefully they're listening." The courtroom held its collective breath. Time seemed to stretch, the artificial sun outside maintaining its smug, unchanging presence. Then, without much fanfare, there was a response. Not a voice, but an overwhelming sensation, an understanding beyond words. Aliana's avatar blinked, a rare crack in her usually calm demeanor. They are responding. It's like a floodgate has opened." "Can we flood it back?" Sinclair asked, eager as a kid in a candy store. "Give them a piece of humanity's finest." "We can try," Aliana murmured, adjusting the parameters. "We've unlocked enough potential through the enhancements to communicate back. It's going to be a collaborative effort, though. Collaborative effort. two words that usually spelled disaster in any bureaucratic setting. But here in the United Earth Republic's virtual court, they were all they had. "Okay, team," Veridiana said, feeling like a coach who'd just put her motley crew on the field. "Let's show them what humanity's made of, warts and all." Lysander chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that seemed to resonate through the virtual space. "Let's hope they appreciate sarcasm as much as we do." Veridiana focused on the collective consciousness around her. The avatars, once individual representations, now seemed to blend together, forming a unified force of will and intent. It was a gamble, sure, but one they had no choice but to take. The room seemed to pulse with a life of its own, each member contributing their enhanced cognitive abilities to the effort. Neural pathways intertwined, and for a moment they were more than just a group of desperate individuals. They were humanity's answer to the universe's cruel punchline. Veridiana felt her thoughts merging with the others, a strange sensation that was both exhilarating and terrifying in its intimacy. She could sense Garrett's wry skepticism, Sinclair's irrepressible humor, Aliana's calculated intelligence, and Lysander's bemused detachment. Together they formed a message, a tapestry of human emotion, humor, resilience, and a healthy dose of snark. They fed it into the alien protocol, hoping to convey everything they were, everything they could be. The response was immediate, a sensation of recognition, of understanding. It was as if the universe had paused just for a moment to listen. And then the virus began to deactivate. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the courtroom. Veridiana felt it wash over her like a wave, a release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. The artificial sun continued its loop outside, but for the first time, it seemed less like a taunt and more like an old friend. Garrett's storm cloud avatar shifted, sunlight breaking through in metaphorical rays. "Did we just convince ancient aliens to back off with a group chat?" "Seems like it," Veridiana replied, a laugh bubbling up despite herself. "We've officially become the universe's most unexpected success story." Sinclair grinned, his avatar's expression matching his real one for once. "I always knew we'd save the world with humor. Take that, doom and gloom, Doctor." Aliana's hologram flickered, her posture relaxing now that the immediate threat was gone. "The enhancements are stabilizing. We've managed to retain them without further complications." "Which means," Lysander drawled, his voice a rich tapestry of sarcasm, "we get to keep our new toys without blowing up the sandbox." Veridiana nodded, the weight of the past weeks lifting from her shoulders. "All right, team, we've done it. We've shown the universe what humanity's made of." The avatars around her seemed to shine with a newfound confidence, a sense of triumph that was as infectious as the virus had been. They had faced the universe's cruelest test and come out on top, not through brute force or blind luck, but through sheer adaptability and a refusal to go down without a fight. It was a victory, bittersweet and hard one, but a victory nonetheless. "Let's wrap this up," Veridiana said, her voice carrying a renewed sense of purpose. "We've got a world to rebuild, a future to shape, and I have a feeling we're going to do it with style." As the avatars returned to their respective duties, Veridiana lingered, taking a moment to appreciate the artificial sun's endless loop. It was still there, still unchanging, but now it felt less like a cosmic joke and more like a reminder of their resilience. "Well," she murmured to herself, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, "if we can survive this, we can survive anything." The universe might not have given them a roadmap, but they'd proven they didn't need one. In the end, it was their unpredictability, their grit, and their irreverent humor that had seen them through. And as Veridiana turned away from the window, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't so bad after all. It was just another player in the grand game, and they'd managed to bluff their way through with a winning hand. It was a lesson, a testament to humanity's indomitable spirit, and a reminder that, even in the darkest of times, a little laughter could light the way. As Veridiana left the virtual courtroom, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain: they were going to be just fine. And if the universe had a problem with that, well, it could take it up with their newly minted cosmic customer service team. Veridiana emerged from the virtual courtroom feeling like she'd just come off a roller coaster ride designed by sadistic aliens with a penchant for emotional whiplash. Her avatar flickered as she logged off, the familiar sensation akin to peeling off a particularly stubborn band-aid. The world outside, digital as it was, hummed with a new energy, an energy she hoped wouldn't devolve into chaos overnight. As she sipped her lukewarm coffee, because of course, the one constant in the universe was crap coffee, she considered the aftermath of their cosmic conference call. The virus had been a game changer, no doubt. It had turned humanity into a group of highly enhanced beings, and while that sounded like the setup for a great sci-fi superhero saga, she knew better. If there was one thing humans excelled at, it was turning potential into problems. She'd seen the reports: people lifting cars, learning new languages in an afternoon, and, quite predictably, blowing up microwaves with their minds. Turns out, superhuman abilities were great until someone decided to play God with the kitchen appliances. Judge Veridiana sighed, placing the coffee mug down with enough force to remind herself it was not, in fact, an alien skull. "All right, folks," she addressed the room, knowing full well that her team could hear her. "We've won the battle, but now we have to make sure we don't blow ourselves up with victory fireworks." Garrett's storm cloud avatar drifted into view, now with occasional rainbows piercing through the gloom. "So what's next? Do we establish a league of extraordinary humans or just wait for someone to accidentally vaporize their nosy neighbor?" "Both sound equally interesting," Sinclair chimed in, his grin as irrepressible as ever. "But maybe we should aim for not accidentally causing an international incident. Baby steps." Dr. Eliana's hologram shimmered beside them, a digital flurry of precision and poise. "The enhancements are stabilizing, but we need a framework for integration. Otherwise, we'll end up with more than just blown-up microwaves." "Unstable abilities are like unstable governments," Lysander mused, trotting in with all the smugness of a creature who knew he'd outlived several human civilizations. "They crumble under pressure and take everyone down with them." Veridiana nodded, rubbing her temples as if she could massage away the headache forming there. "We need to introduce these abilities into society cautiously, roll them out like a buggy software update, somewhere between a patch and a catastrophe." Sinclair leaned back, contemplating the chaos they were trying to avoid. "Would be nice if the universe gave us a user manual. You know, using your new powers without destroying the planet for dummies." Dr. Eliana ran a diagnostic through her interface, watching the data scroll like an accountant checking for misplaced decimals. "We can start by educating people on managing their abilities. Workshops, seminars, though knowing humanity, most will skip and hope for osmosis." "Maybe we can start with the basics," Garrett suggested, his voice dry as a desert. "Like how to not set fire to your own pants." Lysander snorted, clearly amused by the circus act that was human adaptation. "Humanity, always reaching for the stars but tripping over their own laces." Veridiana rolled her eyes, a gesture as habitual as breathing. "All right, Snark Brigade, let's get serious. We need to monitor these changes, set up a system to ensure people use their enhancements responsibly. And maybe, just maybe, we can avoid becoming a species-wide cautionary tale." The group exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They were all aware of the stakes. The virus had been a wake-up call, a reminder that the universe was filled with mysteries and dangers they couldn't even begin to fathom. But it had also shown them their potential, when they weren't too busy bickering, at least. "Let's start with the basics," Veridiana suggested, pulling up a holographic map of Earth. "Regions are stabilizing, but we need representatives in key areas, people who can manage these new abilities and keep the peace." Sinclair leaned in, eyes scanning the projections. You mean like superpowered diplomats, because I'd pay to see that negotiation. Exactly, Aliana confirmed. We need people who can handle the pressure and ensure everything doesn't unravel faster than a poorly knitted sweater. Well, good luck finding those people, Garrett muttered. Last I checked, most humans couldn't even handle rush hour traffic without losing their minds. Lysander stretched, his form flickering with a casual grace. Humans are adaptable. It's their strongest trait. Or their downfall, depending on the day. Then it's a good thing we've got you to keep us grounded, Veridiana said, not entirely without affection. Let's get to work. We've got a world to rebuild, and I'd rather it not resemble a war zone. As the virtual room hummed with activity, Veridiana felt a strange sense of optimism. It was ironic, really, considering the universe's penchant for spite. But maybe, just maybe, this was their chance to turn the tables. They'd been dealt a rough hand, but they were still in the game. And if there was one thing humans knew how to do, it was play to win. Weeks passed in a blur of data, meetings, and the occasional existential crisis. Veridiana found herself at the center of a whirlwind, directing the integration of abilities like a conductor desperately trying to wrangle an orchestra of over-enthusiastic toddlers. Regions were stabilizing, albeit slowly. Some places took to the changes like ducks to water, or perhaps like humans to chaos. Others, predictably, required more hand-holding than a kindergarten field trip. She sat in her office, a real one this time, watching reports come in. The window behind her showcased an artificial skyline, a reminder that even in a digital world the sun could still be stuck in an endless loop. Some things never changed. A notification pinged, interrupting her thoughts. It was from Sinclair, always the harbinger of sarcasm. The message read, "Heard about the guy who tried to use his powers to win a marathon, tripped on the first hurdle. Humanity in a nutshell, right?" Veridiana chuckled, typing a quick response. At least he didn't trip into a black hole. Silver linings. Garrett's hologram appeared, storm cloud hovering with its usual dreariness. "We've got a situation in Sector 12. A group's trying to harness their abilities to start a new religion. Because that's what we need," Veridiana groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. "More zealots with firepower." "Relax," Garrett replied, voice a soothing blend of sarcasm and weariness. "We've got people on it. Just another day in Utopia." Aliana's face appeared on the holographic interface, calm and collected despite the chaos. "The enhancements have stabilized in 70% of the population. We're seeing fewer incidents." "Good," Veridiana said, "but keep monitoring. The last thing we need is another unexpected evolution. We're dealing with enough surprise parties." Lysander trotted in, his equine form as bemused as ever. "You humans really are something. Give you a taste of power, and you immediately start planning the next apocalypse." "Hey, planning is what we do best," Sinclair retorted, joining the conversation. "We just prefer if someone else cleans up the mess." As much as Veridiana hated to admit it, he wasn't wrong. Humanity had a knack for making epic blunders, often with style. But this time, she hoped they'd learned enough to steer clear of disaster. "Let's keep our focus," she instructed, bringing up a display of the current situation reports. "We've got a lot of work ahead, but I'm confident we can manage, as long as everyone sticks to the plan and doesn't decide to play superhero." Garrett grunted, a sound that translated to resigned agreement. "Let's hope the universe doesn't have any more curveballs planned." "After this," Veridiana replied dryly, "I'm not sure it could surprise us even if it tried." And as they set to work, she allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. The world was changing, evolving in ways they couldn't have foreseen. But amidst the chaos, there was potential for a future where humanity didn't just survive but thrived. It was a long shot, sure, but for now it was enough. As Veridiana settled into the rhythm of rebuilding a world on the brink, she couldn't help but smile. They'd faced the worst the universe had to offer and emerged stronger, wiser, and perhaps most importantly, ready for whatever came next. "All right, team," she said, a note of finality in her voice. Let's make sure the universe knows we're not just its cosmic punchline. We're the punchline it didn't see coming. With that, they dove back into the fray, determined to write their own story, and make sure it was a damn good one.